Hey, Midnight Warriors. Crescent Moon, we're grateful you're here for tonight's thrilling tale. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Let's dive straight into chapter 1 of this gripping story. The coffin lay in the desert like an unmarked sin. Dust whipped across its blackened metal, the stars above cold and silent as the wind howled through broken columns of stone. A battered seal flag draped over the box, a final tribute to a man who was supposed to be gone forever. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Alex Cole's heart slammed against his ribs. Sweat trickled down his temple, mingling with the dried blood crusted on his lips. He fought to keep his breathing low, steady, the way he had in 100 Black Ops deployments. The coffin had been his prison, his grave, and now his rebirth. He remembered every inch of that final mission, the desert ambush, the flash of betrayal in the captain's eyes, the bullet that should have ended him. He remembered his last breath, the taste of sand, the darkness swallowing him whole. But he hadn't died. No, he'd been buried alive by those he trusted most. His fists clenched as he pushed open the lid with a silent roar of muscles long trained to fight. The scent of sand and sweat filled his lungs. Outside, the world waited, a world that believed he was gone. But ghosts never stay buried. He stepped out of the coffin, boots sinking into blood-soaked dirt. His eyes found the distant glow of firelight on the horizon, an enemy's camp, a lover's betrayal, a mission unfinished. He reached down, feeling the cold metal of his wedding ring, worn but unbroken. Not today, he growled, the desert winds tearing the words from his mouth. Not today. He'd been left for dead in the sand, but he was coming back. For the truth. For the blood oath they broke. For the wife who'd married his killer. And for the vengeance he'd carve into the bones of this desert. Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. Alex moved like a wraith in the dark, each step echoing with memories of gunfire and brotherhood. He slipped past twisted wreckage, burnt-out Humvees, the rusted husks of half-buried tanks. The wind carried the faint scent of charred flesh and diesel, a reminder that war never really ends. It just changes its name. He reached an old observation post, a bunker etched into the rocks, half collapsed but still standing. Inside, he found a battered radio, its dials flickering in the gloom. He turned the knob, static crackling like ghost voices. Echo bass, this is Nomad, he whispered into the mic, the call sign of a dead man. Silence. Then a voice, half familiar, full of venom. You shouldn't be alive, Alex. You should have stayed dead. His breath caught. The voice was Michael Thorne's, his brother-in-arms turned traitor. The man who'd once pulled him from a firefight in Mosul, who now wore his wedding ring like a trophy. Rage boiled in Alex's gut, his knuckles whitening around the radio. He pressed the talk button, voice low and lethal. You took everything from me, Michael. My life, my wife, my honor. You were always too noble for this world, Michael sneered. Lila's mine now. She wears your death like a veil. The words cut deeper than any bullet. Alex's pulse roared in his ears, but he forced himself to stay cold, focused, like the sniper he once was. Every word, every breath was a battlefield. He turned off the radio, the silence a final insult. His mind sharpened. Michael thought he'd won. But Alex had one advantage. The enemy thought he was dead. And that was a weapon no one could see coming. He stepped out into the night, eyes on the horizon. This was no longer just survival, it was the start of his own war. The desert night was a black ocean, the stars pinpricks of cold fire. Alex moved with the patience of a sniper, each footstep measured, every breath a silent promise. His thoughts flickered back to Lila's face, soft, once full of laughter. He remembered her lips against his, her whisper, "Come back to me, Alex." Always. Now she was wearing his death like a wedding dress, standing beside the man who sold his blood for a fortune. He reached a rise overlooking a convoy checkpoint, mercenaries loading crates of weapons under floodlights. Trucks groaned as they were packed with crates marked with NATO sigils, secrets turned into currency. His heart clenched. This wasn't just betrayal, it was treason. He raised his stolen binoculars, scanning for the face he hated most. There, Michael's smirk gleamed in the harsh light, a viper coiled in human skin. Lila was there too, her hand resting on Michael's chest, her eyes hollow, as if the soul inside had been traded for safety. Alex's hand went to his ring, twisting it against his skin. "I'll make you see me, Lila," he murmured. "I'll make you remember." Static crackled in his earpiece. Logan's voice, rough as gravel. "Ghost, we've got sat feed. Tracker ready when you are." Alex's eyes narrowed. "Copy that. Eyes on target. Beginning infiltration." He slipped into the dark, his body moving like liquid shadow. Each step took him deeper into enemy lines, and deeper into the truth that had buried him alive. His SEAL training hummed in his veins. Never hesitate, never falter. In the end, it wasn't about medals or glory. It was about the mission, the truth. He would walk through hell itself to drag the truth back into the light. And if the desert wanted his blood, it would have to earn it. Alex watched from the shadows as the convoy disappeared into the black of the desert, the last echoes of engines fading like ghosts. The quiet was deafening. He waited until the last guard had vanished into the checkpoint's tents, then moved down the slope, boots silent on the hard-packed dirt. A small graveyard waited in the hollow of the dunes, wooden crosses bleached by the sun, sand creeping up their bases. His own headstone stood among them. Lieutenant Commander Alexander Cole, Kia, honored in death but betrayed in life. He crouched beside it, fingers tracing the chiseled letters, the lie that marked his grave. A flicker of movement. Lila stood by the headstone, a black shawl pulled tight against the desert chill. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with something deeper than grief. She held a single white rose in her hand, trembling slightly as she knelt by the marker. "Alex," she whispered, voice barely a breath. "I'm sorry. I thought I had no choice." He stayed hidden, heart pounding. The wind tugged at her shawl, revealing the curve of her jaw, the hollow of her throat. He remembered how that skin felt under his fingertips, how her laughter once lit up every dark corner of his soul. "I never stopped loving you," she said, tears streaking dust across her cheeks. "But he said he'd kill me if I didn't." She broke off, clutching the rose so hard the thorns cut her palm. Blood bloomed bright against white petals. Alex's breath caught in his throat. She was still his, even after everything. But the ring on her finger wasn't his. It was Michael's, and it burned like betrayal in the cold night. She kissed the headstone, lips lingering. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted this." As she stood and turned away, Alex slipped from the shadows, moving like a ghost. His hand hovered over his sidearm, but he forced it down. Not yet. He watched her leave, each step a silent prayer. In the desert silence, he swore to himself he would bring her back from this grave she'd built around them both. One mission at a time. The checkpoint's perimeter was a ring of light and steel, mercenaries shifting in restless patterns. Alex ghosted through the broken landscape, the night air biting against his skin. His focus was absolute, eyes on the man who had stolen everything. Michael Thorne, the man who once shared foxholes and war stories, who now wore Alex's ring like a prize. Michael stood in the glow of a portable floodlight, barking orders at a pair of guards. His voice was calm, calculated, the same tone he'd used in countless missions to keep his team alive. Now it was a different kind of mission, one that had Alex's name written in blood. "Double-check the crates," Michael ordered. "No mistakes this time. We're not dealing with amateurs." The guards moved quickly, fear evident in their rigid posture. Alex's jaw tightened. He remembered that voice, how it once calmed the chaos in the middle of firefights, how it now fueled the fire in his gut. Lila emerged from the shadows, her white shawl fluttering like a ghost veil. Michael turned to her, his expression softening into something that made Alex's skin crawl. "Cold out tonight, isn't it?" Love? Michael said, brushing a hand against her cheek. She flinched. Don't call me that, she whispered, voice cracking. I did what you wanted. Let me go. Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let you go? You're my wife now, Lila. We made vows, didn't we? His hand moved to the small of her back, possessive, and she stiffened beneath his touch. Alex's fingers curled around the hilt of his combat knife, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed to act, to end this right here. But he forced himself to wait, to watch. One wrong move, and the mission would die with him. Michael leaned close, whispering in Lila's ear. Remember who saved you, Lila. Remember who buried your past. Alex's breath was ragged, each word another nail in the coffin of the life he'd lost. But he wouldn't let them win. Not tonight. He melted back into the darkness, the desert wind carrying his silent vow. Michael would pay, and Lila would be free. The world had turned to whispers and shadows as Alex tracked Michael's convoy deeper into the desert. Moonlight glinted off steel and glass, the convoy's armored trucks crawling like insects across the dunes. Alex moved alongside them, the dust biting at his throat, the weight of his stolen wedding band heavy on his hand. At a half-ruined outpost, once a NATO checkpoint, now a fortress for traitors, Michael's men dismounted. They moved with military precision, rifles slung low, eyes scanning the dark. Alex's heart thudded steady in his chest, his old training rising to the surface. Every breath, every heartbeat was measured in calm. His eyes locked on the prize, Michael's hand, the wedding band he'd stolen. Michael stepped forward, his voice sharp and clear. Set the perimeter. No mistakes tonight. This is our final shipment before the buyers arrive. Alex sank deeper into the shadows, his fingers tracing the ring he wore, identical to Michael's. His plan was simple but precise. He'd swap them, using the confusion of the night to plan his tracker. The same tracker that would expose the arms deals to NATO command and bury Michael once and for all. He waited for the perfect moment. Then he struck. A quick flash of motion, a brush of hands as he passed a distracted guard. Michael's ring was in his hand before anyone saw the exchange, his own ring slipping into its place on Michael's finger. It was a ghost's touch, silent, final. The wind shifted, and for a moment Michael's eyes flickered, as if sensing the phantom in the night. But he turned away, barking more orders. Alex's pulse settled. The ring was in place. The tracker's heartbeat was alive. He retreated into the darkness, slipping past the guards like a breath of wind. The ring pulsed against his palm, a promise of vengeance and justice. Alex's eyes glinted in the moonlight as he whispered into his calm, "Tracker's hot. Let's light up the truth." The desert swallowed his words, but Alex knew one thing. No matter how far they ran, the truth would hunt them down. The night stretched on, the desert alive with the faint crackle of radios and the shuffling of boots. Alex hunkered low in the ruins of a stone wall, his breathing calm, his mind locked in the mission's rhythm. Operation Ghost, it wasn't just a code name. It was his resurrection. He watched through thermal sights as Michael's men moved crates into a hidden bunker, the shapes of rifles and rocket launchers lit up in shades of red. Every box they moved was a sin waiting to be unmasked. Every handshake a betrayal written in stolen blood. Logan's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Ghost, you're a shadow out there. Confirm rings in place." Alex's fingers tightened around the tracker. "Tracker's hot. Michael's wearing it like it's his crown." "Roger that. NATO's patching in. Show them everything, brother." Alex's mouth twisted into a cold smile. "Let's show them what betrayal really looks like." He shifted position, slipping deeper into the maze of shattered buildings. The sand muffled his steps, his mind focused on the next phase. He needed proof, visual confirmation of the arms deal. He needed to see Michael's face as the truth crashed down around him. At the edge of the compound, he found a vantage point above a loading bay. Below, Lila stood beside Michael, her face pale in the harsh floodlights. She looked hollow, but her eyes, there was something still burning there. Alex felt it in his gut, the old ache of what they were. Michael pulled her close, his voice low and possessive. Smile for the camera, my love. We're rewriting history tonight. Alex's pulse was a steady drumbeat. His silenced pistol was ready, but this wasn't the moment for a bullet. It was the moment to watch and wait. Every second he stayed hidden was another inch of rope around Michael's neck. In the shadows, Alex whispered to himself, a promise that tasted like fire. You made me a ghost. Now you'll see what a ghost can do. The moon hung low, a pale witness to the scene unfolding below. Alex watched as Michael pressed a kiss to Lila's temple, a mockery of tenderness that made Alex's teeth clench. Lila didn't flinch, she didn't dare, but her shoulders tensed as if she could feel the weight of every lie pressing down on her. You look beautiful tonight, Michael murmured, his hand resting on her hip. The perfect bride for a new empire. Lila's voice was a whisper, brittle as old paper. This isn't what I wanted, Michael. None of this. What you wanted doesn't matter, Michael said, his tone turning sharp. You chose this path the moment you let him die. Alex's heart hammered in his chest. He could see the tremor in Lila's hands, the way her gaze flicked toward the shadows. Was she searching for him, or for the man she'd once loved, now a ghost in the dark? He shifted his position, his rifle slung across his back, fingers brushing the hilt of his knife. He could end it now, put a bullet through Michael's skull and drag Lila from this nightmare. But he forced himself to stay still. The mission came first. The truth had to be exposed. Below, Michael raised a glass of whiskey, his smile cold and triumphant. To the future, my love, and to the ghosts of the past, may they stay buried. Lila's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she clinked her glass against his. Her voice was soft, but Alex heard every word. Some ghosts never stay buried, Michael. He felt those words like a spark in the night, an ember of defiance still alive in her heart. He knew then that she hadn't given up. Neither would he. In the silence between them, Alex mouthed the words she couldn't say out loud. I'm here, Lila. I'm coming back for you. The next dawn was a smear of red on the horizon, the desert wind carrying the bitter tang of gun oil and betrayal. Alex crouched in the skeleton of an abandoned guard tower, the radio pressed tight against his ear. Logan's voice came through, low and urgent. Ghost, NATO's greenlit the op. We have an hour before the satellite link goes hot. You ready to move? Alex's jaw tightened. Always ready. Logan's chuckle was a familiar bomb. Thought I'd find you dead in a ditch by now. You never did know when to quit. Quitting's for men with nothing left to fight for, Alex said. His eyes scanned the compound below. Michael's men moved with the bored precision of mercenaries who'd never faced real war. I'm not done yet. He checked his gear, every magazine loaded, every blade honed. The weight of his old seal trident patch was tucked into his chest plate, a silent promise to the men who never came home. He thought of them, of how they died in the ambush meant for him. Their blood demanded more than silence. He caught sight of Lila moving through the compound, her white shawl billowing in the morning breeze. She looked up at the tower, her eyes scanning the broken windows. For a moment, their gazes met across the distance. And in that fleeting connection, he saw everything, the love they'd lost, the future they could still fight for. Logan's voice crackled back in. You sure you're not coming back from this one, brother? Alex took a slow breath. I already died once. This is just the reckoning. He slid the radio into his pocket, his mind a blade honed to a single purpose. The war wasn't over. It had just come home. And this time, Alex Cole wasn't fighting for orders or medals. He was fighting for the only thing that still mattered. The compound thrummed with tension as Alex melted deeper into the shadows. He moved through the maze of shipping containers and half-buried bunkers like a phantom, every step measured, every breath controlled. The ring on Michael's finger pulsed with the faint heartbeat of the tracker, a lifeline to the satellite feed that would damn them all. Overhead, the sun rose blood-red, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. Alex's mind was a razor's edge, honed by years of combat and betrayal. He saw the world in angles and exit points, in the flick of a safety switch and the tremor in a man's hand. Michael stood in the courtyard, framed by the harsh glare of the floodlights. He wore the stolen wedding band like a trophy, his smile easy, charming, deceptive. Alex had seen that smile before, in dusty streets where trust meant survival and betrayal meant death. Michael clapped a hand on a mercenary's shoulder, his laughter echoing off the stone. We're making history today, gentlemen. A new empire built on the bones of the old. The men laughed with him, but Alex saw the cracks, the glances exchanged, the unease in their postures. Even mercenaries knew when a leader's words were poison. Logan's voice came through in a soft crackle. Ghost, sat feeds coming online. NATO's watching. Alex's reply was a whisper. Let them see it all. Every deal, every betrayal. Michael's going to be the face of his own damnation. He shifted his position, eyes on Lila as she moved through the chaos. Her face was pale, but her chin was lifted, her movements deliberate. He remembered the fire in her eyes the night he first met her, how she'd refused to flinch, even as the world crumbled around them. She paused by Michael's side, her hand brushing his arm. Alex's gut twisted at the sight, but he forced himself to see past it, to see the woman he'd loved, still fighting in the shadows. Michael leaned close, his voice soft but cruel. Smile for the cameras, Lila. You're the queen of this kingdom now. Lila's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. But her eyes were all Alex needed. They burned with defiance, with a silent vow, and Alex promised her in that instant. He would burn this kingdom to the ground for her. The compound's perimeter was a restless beast, mercenaries prowling with rifles slung low, shadows flickering in the gaps between the floodlights. Alex slipped through them like smoke, his movements guided by years of SEAL training and a mind honed by loss. He crouched near a stack of ammo crates, the hum of the tracker in his ear. Each pulse was a whisper of triumph. Michael's every movement, every deal, every life fed into the satellite uplink above. Alex imagined the NATO command watching it all, eyes widening as their golden boy's empire crumbled in real time. Logan's voice crackled in. Ghost, uplink is solid. We're getting everything, documents, video, voice. This is it, brother. Alex's voice was cold steel. Good. Make sure they see it all. No shadows, no secrets. He adjusted his rifle, its matte barrel glinting like a promise in the half-light. Through the scope, he watched Michael pacing, phone pressed to his ear, a shark in a sea of desperate men. His words were clipped, measured. He was still trying to control the chaos, still clinging to the illusion of power. But Alex saw the cracks, the tightening of Michael's jaw, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't invincible. He was just a man who'd built his kingdom on lies. Lila stood behind him, her shoulders squared. Alex watched her carefully, every tilt of her head, every flick of her eyes a silent code. She was playing a dangerous game, but she hadn't given up. Not yet. The pulse of the tracker quickened as Michael gestured to the bunker entrance. Guards snapped to attention, hauling open the doors to reveal crates of weapons, enough to arm an army and start a dozen wars. Alex's gut twisted. This was what his blood had paid for. This was the price of betrayal. His hand tightened on the stock of his rifle. The time for shadows was almost over. Soon, there would be no more secrets, no more lies. He whispered into the calm, a promise as steady as the desert wind. Logan, tell NATO the ghost is coming home. The bunker was a concrete throat cut deep into the earth, cold and echoing with the clatter of crates and the low murmur of mercenary voices. Alex moved down the narrow stairs like a phantom, each step a silent prayer to the men he'd lost and the oath he still carried. The air was heavy with the stink of gun oil and sweat, the sour tang of desperation clinging to the stone walls. He slipped past two guards hunched over a battered map, their words a blur of weapons and blood money. Alex's fingers brushed the hilt of his combat knife as he moved. He was a ghost in the dark, but he was ready to become the blade when the time came. At the bottom of the stairs, he paused. Michael's voice carried from the depths of the bunker, calm and venomous. These weapons are the future, gentlemen. Forget flags and borders. This is the new order. Alex's breath was steady, each inhale grounding him in the mission. He reached up, touching the ring he'd planted on Michael's hand. The tracker's pulse was strong, every word Michael spoke, Every bribe and promise was being fed to NATO in real time. He moved forward, slipping into the bunker's main chamber. Stacks of crates loomed like silent witnesses, the air vibrating with the low hum of generators. Michael stood at the center, framed by flickering work lights. His smile was a mask, easy, charming, but Alex saw the rot beneath. Lila stood by his side, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She was pale, but her eyes were steady. Alex's heart twisted. He saw the strength there, the defiance she wouldn't let die. Michael turned to her, his voice smooth as silk. "This is the future, Lila. Our future." She swallowed, her voice a low whisper. "And what of the past, Michael? What of the ghosts we've buried?" Michael's smile flickered. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. "The past is dead, Lila. And so is he." Alex's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to wait. The mission came first. The truth had to be shown, no matter how much it burned. He melted deeper into the shadows, every nerve alive with the promise of what was coming. This was no longer just a mission. It was the reckoning. The bunker's stale air clung to Alex's skin like a shroud as he drifted deeper into its heart. Rows of crates stretched out like graves, marked with the stamps of nations that had no idea they'd been betrayed. He moved silently, each breath measured, his eyes tracking every flicker of movement in the half-lit corridor. At the far end, a makeshift table had been set up, maps scattered like playing cards, glasses of whiskey catching the flicker of overhead bulbs. Michael sat at the head of the table, his expression calm and sure, every word that left his lips another stone in the walls of his kingdom. "Gentlemen," Michael said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "This isn't just a sale, it's the dawn of a new era, a future that belongs to those who take it." The men around him, mercenaries in mismatched gear, former soldiers turned wolves, nodded in grim silence. They had no loyalty but to the weight of gold, no creed but the crack of gunfire. Michael's eyes glittered as he raised his glass in a silent toast. Alex watched from the shadows, the scent of whiskey and gunpowder filling his lungs. His pulse was steady, his mind locked in the mission's rhythm. He saw how easily Michael lied, how smoothly he painted betrayal as vision. The same man who once stood beside him in dusty alleyways, who'd shared blood and battle, now a king in a kingdom of shadows. Across the table, Lila stood like a statue, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes met Alex's across the darkness, and in that instant, he saw the truth beneath her fear. She was trapped, but she wasn't broken. Not yet. Michael leaned back, his voice soft but sharp. "Drink, Lila. Celebrate with me." She lifted the glass, her hand trembling just enough to show she still had a soul. Her voice was a whisper. "To ghosts and graves." Alex's lips twisted into a smile as he watched. The ring on Michael's finger pulsed with the truth. Every lie, every stolen promise beamed up to the satellites above. And in the silence between heartbeats, Alex promised her again. Tonight, the ghost would have his vengeance. Outside the bunker, the wind howled through the ruins, rattling rusted gates and sending dust swirling like spirits. Inside, the hush of the chamber felt even colder, every breath a silent threat. Michael rose from his chair, his movements smooth and calculated. He moved to Lila's side, fingers brushing her hair away from her face with the tenderness of a man who'd forgotten how to love. She held herself still, her eyes locked on his as if they were the only two people in the world. "You've always been my queen, Lila," Michael murmured, his voice low and intimate. "Even when he was alive, you belonged to me." Alex's jaw tightened in the darkness, his fingers curling around the grip of his pistol. The words were poison, each one a dagger he could almost feel in his own chest. But Lila didn't flinch. She met Michael's gaze with a calm that cut deeper than any bullet. "I was never yours," she said, her voice like a quiet storm. "I was his, and I still am." Michael's eyes darkened, his lips curving into a cold smile. "Then let him watch." He pulled her close, his mouth pressing against hers in a kiss that was nothing but a brand. The mercenaries around them shifted uneasily, the air thick with the scent of whiskey and sweat. Alex's pulse roared in his ears, every instinct screaming to break cover, to drag her away from the monster in the light. But he held himself still, his mind ablaze. Every second he waited, every breath he controlled, was another step closer to the end. When Michael finally pulled back, Lila's lips were set in a hard line. She didn't look away. She didn't wipe away the stain of that kiss. Instead, she let it sit there, a brand of defiance on her lips. Alex saw it. The strength in her spine, the fire in her eyes. She was still his. Still fighting. He breathed in the cold air, the weight of the mission grounding him. Soon, he thought. Soon. Back in the shadows of the bunker's corridor, Alex pressed his earbud deeper, Logan's voice a calm anchor in the storm. Ghost, NATO's feet is solid. They're watching it all, Michael's deals, the weapons. Everything. Alex's voice was a whisper of steel. Good. I want them to see what betrayal looks like in the light. He shifted position, slipping down a narrow hall that reeked of oil and old blood. His boots found silent purchase in the dust, his mind mapping every exit, every angle. He was more than a man now. He was the reckoning in the dark. In a small storeroom, he paused. A radio console crackled on a battered crate, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. He flicked it on, tuning through the static until he heard Lila's voice, hushed and desperate. Michael, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what we promised. Michael's reply was a low growl. Promises don't matter anymore, Lila. Only power. Alex's throat tightened. Her voice, full of fear and fury, but unbroken. He could almost see her there, shoulders squared, the weight of the world on her back. I did what you asked, she said, voice shaking. But I won't be a part of this anymore. I won't be a part of your war. Michael laughed, a sound that made Alex's skin crawl. You already are, Lila. You always will be. And if you try to run, you know what happens. Silence. Then the quiet sound of Lila's breath, ragged but still strong. Alex closed his eyes, letting her voice steady his pulse. He clicked off the radio, every nerve alive with purpose. He had the proof, the confession, the final piece of the puzzle. His voice was low, a promise carried on the desert wind. Logan, tell NATO they'll have everything they need. But tonight, I finish this. He turned back to the darkness, the echo of Lila's voice his guide. No more shadows. No more ghosts. Tonight, the truth would rise. Alex's breath fogged in the cold air of the bunker's back corridor, the only light the flickering of an emergency bulb overhead. He pressed his back to the rough concrete, listening to the distant echo of boots and hushed conversations. His pulse was steady, trained, ready. He was deep in enemy territory, but this was where he thrived. He moved along the corridor, every sense alive. The walls bore the marks of hurried construction, patches of old blood, bullet holes that spoke of a past that refused to stay buried. He paused at a cracked window, the broken glass offering a sliver of the compound outside. Through it, he watched Michael's men loading crates into trucks, AKs, RPGs, the tools of a war that would never end. He clicked his mic, Logan's voice a steadying presence in his ear. Ghost status. In position, Alex murmured. Michael's moving the final shipment tonight. He's bluffing, telling his buyers he's in control. But he's scared, Logan. I can see it. He should be, Logan said, the edge in his voice unmistakable. We've got eyes in the sky. NATO's ready to move the second you give the word. Alex's gaze shifted, finding Lila in the crowd. She moved with deliberate calm, every gesture measured, her eyes scanning the shadows. She was playing her own game, caught between the man she'd once loved and the monster she was forced to stand beside. Alex knew that look in her eyes. It was the same fire that had burned in the heat of every firefight they'd survived together. He whispered, almost to himself, Hold on, Lila. I'm coming for you. He slipped deeper into the compound, past a group of mercenaries laughing over a dirty card game. Their voices were rough, their laughter edged with the kind of desperation that came from men who'd already sold their souls. Alex moved past them unseen, his steps light and silent. At the far end of the corridor, he found what he needed, a hidden room filled with maps and manifest lists. He snapped pictures with a small camera, every file another nail in Michael's coffin. His mission was clear, his mind focused. He wasn't just a soldier tonight. He was the executioner of a man who'd traded honor for power. And before the night was done, Michael Thorne would know the price of betrayal. The desert night was a living thing beyond the bunker, the wind whispering secrets through the cracks in the walls. Inside, Lila stood in the shadows of the command room, her hands clenched into fists as Michael's men moved around her, checking weapons, arguing in low, urgent tones. She watched Michael pace the floor, his phone pressed to his ear, every movement precise and predatory. His voice was calm, but she could see the strain in the tight set of his jaw. He was losing control, and he knew it. The buyers want guarantees, he snapped into the phone. Tell them the shipment is secure. No delays, no mistakes. Lila's breath hitched, but she held her ground. She'd played this role for too long, worn the mask of compliance until it had almost fused to her skin. But deep inside, the part of her that still remembered Alex, his touch, his voice, the fierce love in his eyes, was awake and burning. She stepped closer, her voice soft but unyielding. Michael, this isn't going to work. You can't control everything. His gaze snapped to hers, his smile a slash of white in the dim light. I don't need to control everything, Lila. Just you. She met his gaze without flinching, even as her heart raced. You're wrong. You never controlled me. You never will. Michael's eyes darkened, and he reached out, his hand brushing her cheek in a mockery of tenderness. Then prove it, he murmured. Prove your loyalty. Or watch everything you love burn. Lila swallowed the fear that threatened to choke her. She thought of Alex, of the man he'd been, of the man he was still fighting to be. She thought of the way he'd always believed in her, even when the world fell apart. She forced a small smile, her voice a blade hidden in silk. I'll prove it, Michael. But remember, ghosts don't stay buried forever. As he turned away, she let the mask slip, just for a moment. In the dark corners of her mind, she saw Alex's eyes, steady and unbreakable. She knew he was out there, moving like a shadow through the night. And she knew she wasn't alone. The sun had set hours ago, but the desert night glowed with the harsh white light of generators and floodlights. In the heart of the compound, the old cathedral stood like a relic of another world. Its stone walls cracked and pitted by decades of war, its stained glass shattered into jagged rainbows of death. Alex slipped through a broken archway, his movements fluid and silent. The tracker in Michael's ring pulsed in his ear, each beat a promise that the end was coming. He paused at the edge of the nave, the air heavy with the scent of gunpowder and old incense. The pews were gone, replaced by rows of crates and steel cases. In the chancel, Michael stood with his inner circle, their faces hard and watchful. Lila was there, her white shawl bright in the shadows, a ghost in a ruin. She held herself with quiet defiance, her eyes flicking across the room until they found him in the darkness. He saw the silent question in her gaze. Are you here? Are you real? He didn't move. He let the certainty in his eyes answer for him. Michael raised his glass in a mockery of a toast. To the future, he said, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. To the new world we're building from the ashes of the old. Alex felt the weight of the past in those words, the missions they'd fought together, the oaths they'd sworn. The man standing in the chancel wasn't the brother he'd bled with in foreign sands. He was something else now, something Alex couldn't let stand. Logan's voice came through the earpiece, steady and sure. We're green across the board. NATO's watching. Make it count, Ghost. Alex's lips curved in a cold smile. I will. He slipped deeper into the cathedral, each step measured, each breath a promise. The shadows embraced him like an old friend, and he moved with the certainty of a man who knew the weight of every secret in this room. Tonight, the cathedral would be the stage for a final act, a reckoning written in blood and betrayal. And in the end, only one ghost would be left standing. Alex crouched behind a crumbling pillar, the chill of the stone seeping into his bones. He focused on the rhythmic thud of his heartbeat, the slow, deliberate breaths that kept his hands steady. In this cathedral-turned battleground, he wasn't just a ghost, He was a soldier sworn to a code that Michael had spat on. He remembered the last mission they'd run together, dust swirling in the wind, the crack of sniper fire in the distance. They bled for each other, watched each other's backs when the world went dark. But Michael had traded that brotherhood for blood money, sold out his own team for a kingdom of corpses. Alex's hand brushed the worn patch of his old SEAL unit, tucked inside his vest like a prayer. The men he'd lost deserved more than silence. This was for them. He adjusted the sights on his suppressed rifle, every movement precise and quiet. Through the scope, he watched Michael laughing with his men, his voice a purr of promises and threats. The ring on Michael's hand, the ring Alex had swapped with the tracker, glinted like a beacon in the harsh light. Logan's voice crackled in his ear, calm and firm. "Ghost, your feed's clean. They're seeing everything. NATO wants you to stand down if this goes hot." "But I won't stand down," Alex cut in, his voice cold steel. "This isn't just about orders, Logan. This is about the oath we took. The brothers we lost." Silence for a beat. Then Logan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then finish it. For them." Alex shifted his position, his shadow melting into the ruin's darkness. His finger hovered near the trigger, but he forced himself to wait. This wasn't the time for bullets. This was the time for truth. He slipped the radio back into his pocket, the weight of it grounding him. Every step forward was a step closer to the reckoning he'd promised. For the brothers who never came home. For the ghosts who wouldn't stay silent. For the woman he still loved, and the life he refused to let Michael steal. Alex moved closer, each step a calculated risk, his senses alive with the weight of what was coming. The cathedral's broken altar loomed ahead, Michael's makeshift throne of lies and stolen lives. The mercenaries milled around him, their voices low, their weapons cradled like infants born of violence. Michael raised his hand, calling for silence. "Tonight," he said, his voice ringing in the hollowed chamber, "we claim what the world denied us. No more flags. No more orders. Only power." His men cheered, a savage, hollow sound. Alex felt it like a drumbeat in his chest, a reminder of what loyalty had been twisted into. He shifted his rifle, slipping behind a half-collapsed column, his eyes locked on Michael's every move. Then Michael's gaze shifted, his lips curling into that too-smooth smile. "But before we drink to victory," he turned, gesturing to Lila. "A toast to the queen of this new kingdom." Lila's face was pale, but her jaw was set. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "And what of the past, Michael? What of the ghosts you buried to build this?" Michael's smile didn't waver. "The past is a graveyard, Lila. And I'm the one who buries the dead." Alex's hands clenched around the stock of his rifle, every muscle in his body coiled and ready. He remembered nights in foreign cities, how Michael's voice had steadied him in the chaos. Now that same voice was a blade at Lila's throat. He clicked his mic, his voice a low growl. "Logan, you getting this?" "Every word, Ghost," Logan said. "We're locked in." Michael raised his glass high. "To the future. And to the ghosts who had the good sense to stay dead." Alex's breath came slow and even, his mind a razor's edge. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Because tonight, he wasn't just here to watch. He was here to end it. The cathedral's cold stone walls seemed to pulse with the weight of everything Alex had lost. He slipped into the old sacristy, a forgotten room turned into a cache of stolen arms. Crates of ammunition and weapons lined the walls, each one a testament to Michael's empire built on blood and betrayal. Alex moved through the shadows, his hands steady as he loaded fresh magazines into his rifle. Each round slid home with a soft click, the sound crisp and certain. His mind was calm, his focus absolute, like every mission he'd survived, every firefight that had tried to claim him. He pulled out a small photograph from an inner pocket. It was worn, the edges frayed by years of dust and sweat. Lila's face smiled up at him, caught in a moment that felt like another life. He traced the outline of her smile with a callous thumb, then tucked it back into his vest. Logan's voice came through, steady and sure. "Ghost, sat feed confirms multiple heat signatures moving your way. You're about to have company." "Let them come," Alex said softly. He clipped the final magazine into place, his eyes cold and unblinking. "This ends tonight." He strapped his combat knife to his thigh, the blade's weight a comfort at his side. He checked the safety on his rifle, then slung it over his shoulder. Every movement was practiced, deliberate. There was no room for hesitation, no space for doubt. He glanced at the door that led back to the main cathedral, the voices of Michael's men echoing down the hall. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on his shoulders, but he didn't falter. He was a seal, a ghost. And tonight, he was the judge and the executioner. As he stepped out of the sacristy, the cathedral seemed to hold its breath. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying the scent of gun oil and old prayers. Alex adjusted his rifle, his mind set like iron. For his brothers. For Lila. For every promise he'd ever made. He was coming for Michael Thorne. And he wouldn't stop until the past was paid in full. Alex emerged from the sacristy, each step an echo of discipline and quiet rage. The cathedral's cracked floor stretched before him like a war map, every shadow a threat, every flicker of candlelight a reminder of how far he'd come. He felt the weight of the loaded rifle on his shoulder, the cold steel of the combat knife at his side, and the promise in his blood that wouldn't let him waver. Lila stood near the altar, her white shawl a beacon in the half-light. Michael's hand rested possessively on her shoulder, his thumb idly tracing her collarbone, a silent claim Alex could almost feel on his own skin. She didn't flinch, but Alex saw the tension in her jaw, the silent plea in her eyes. "Hold on," they seemed to say. "Just a little longer." Michael's voice cut through the hush, calm and sure. "It's almost done, Lila. One final shipment, one last exchange. And then freedom." She turned her face up to him, her eyes dark pools of defiance. "Freedom built on corpses isn't freedom, Michael." Michael's smile was a flicker of cruelty. "You'll see, my love. When the world kneels at our feet, you'll understand." Alex shifted his stance, every muscle coiled and ready. He was close enough now to see the sweat on Michael's brow, the faint tremor in his fingers. Michael was playing the part of the king, but Alex knew the truth. He was just a man trying to hold on to a crumbling empire. He clicked the mic in his ear, his voice a low whisper. "Logan, confirm uplink status. Trackers live, ghost. NATO's seeing it all. You're not alone in there." Alex's lips curved into a cold smile. "Not alone. Not tonight." He took a slow breath, steady and sure. Then he stepped forward, out of the shadows, his boots striking the cracked tiles like a drumbeat. Michael's eyes snapped up, surprise flickering there before it turned to something darker, recognition. Alex's voice was calm, clear, and final. "I told you, Michael, ghosts don't stay buried forever." The air in the cathedral was electric, the flickering shadows alive with tension as Michael's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening on Lila's shoulder. The room went still, every pair of eyes shifting between the two men, brothers once, now enemies bound by blood and betrayal. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she met Alex's gaze across the room. Her lips parted, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down on her chest. She could see it in his eyes, the promise, the fury, the love that had never died. "Alex," she whispered, the name a prayer she'd thought she'd never speak again. Michael's grip turned bruising, his voice a low snarl. "You should have stayed in your grave, Alex. This is my world now." Alex's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady, the calm of a soldier who'd faced death and walked away. "Not yours. Not hers. Not anymore." The mercenaries shifted uneasily, rifles clutched tight, eyes darting between the two men. Even they could feel it, the air crackling with the weight of unfinished war. Lila swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Alex, please. Don't do this. He'll kill you." Alex's gaze softened for a heartbeat, his eyes on hers. "I've already died once, Lila. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Michael's laughter was low and cold. Brave words from a dead man. He reached for the pistol at his belt, his movement smooth and confident. "But I've buried better men than you." Alex didn't flinch. He took another step forward, his voice quiet and sure. "Then bury me again, Michael. If you can." Lila's eyes glistened, her breath shuddering in her chest. She reached for Michael's hand, her touch soft but sure. Please don't do this. Michael ignored her, his focus locked on Alex. You're too late, brother. You've always been too late. Alex's reply was a whisper that carried like a promise. Not tonight. Time seemed to slow as Michael's hand dropped to his sidearm, the flash of steel catching the flickering light. Alex moved in the same instant, his rifle up and ready, his body flowing into the motion like a dance he'd known all his life. The first shot cracked through the silence, a thunderclap that split the air. Alex dove behind a marble column, chips of stone exploding in a spray of dust as bullets slammed into the wall. The mercenaries scattered, shouting, the cathedral erupting into chaos. Lila fell to the ground, her shawl a bright slash of white in the darkness. Michael's snarl was lost in the roar of gunfire as he barked orders, his voice a whip crack of rage. Alex rolled out of cover, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. The world narrowed to the sharp crack of rounds and the flash of muzzle fire, every shot deliberate and precise. He moved like a ghost, every step measured, every breath a prayer to the brothers who watched from the other side. He saw Michael duck behind a crate, his men scrambling to flank Alex. But Alex was a SEAL, this was his world. He flowed through the broken pews and shattered icons, a wraith in the dark, his rifle an extension of his will. A mercenary lunged from the side, a blade flashing in the gloom. Alex sidestepped, his combat knife a whisper of steel in the dark. The man fell without a sound, his lifeblood soaking the dust. Through it all, Lila crawled toward the altar, her breath ragged, her eyes locked on Alex. Their gazes met across the chaos, a silent vow passing between them. Michael rose from cover, his pistol raised, eyes wild. You should have stayed dead, he screamed. Alex's reply was the steady squeeze of the trigger. The shot cracked through the chaos, a single note of finality that seemed to stop time. Michael fell back, his pistol clattering to the floor. The mercenaries hesitated, their resolve wavering. Alex stepped forward, his rifle steady, his voice cold steel. This is for the brothers you betrayed, and the woman you tried to steal. The cathedral fell silent, but for the soft rasp of Lila's breathing and the distant howl of the desert wind. The reckoning had begun. The smoke from spent cartridges hung in the air, the cathedral thick with the scent of gunpowder and old dust. Alex's breathing slowed, his rifle steady against his shoulder as he scanned the chamber. The mercenaries were retreating, their eyes wide with the cold certainty that they had underestimated the ghost in their midst. Michael staggered to his feet behind a half-collapsed pew, blood seeping from a crease in his brow where the bullet had grazed him. His face twisted in a snarl of hatred and disbelief. You think this ends here, Alex? He spat, wiping the blood from his face. You're still nothing but a dead man walking. Alex took a step closer, his boots crunching over the spent casings that littered the ground. You stole everything I ever fought for, Michael. My brothers, my life. Lila. His voice was low, a growl carried on the desert wind. But you forgot the one thing they taught me. Ghosts don't fade. They finish what they start. Michael's laugh was a raw rasp in the stillness. You think she'll ever forgive you? She chose me, Alex. She chose to live. Lila pushed herself up from the altar's cracked marble, her shawl trailing behind her like the ghost of her old life. I never chose this, Michael. You turned my love into your prison. Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned bright. I was yours only because I had no choice. But tonight, she turned to Alex, her voice steady as she met his gaze. Tonight, I choose him. The words cut deeper than any bullet. Michael's sneer faltered, just for a moment, the mask slipping. Then you're as much a fool as he is, he said softly. Alex raised his rifle, the cold metal a promise of everything he'd lost and everything he'd reclaim. I'm done being a ghost in your world, Michael. I'm taking it back. Starting now. The desert wind whistled through the broken windows, the cathedral's shadows deep and shifting. And in that breathless moment, Alex knew that this was more than revenge. This was redemption. The weight of the moment pressed down on the cracked stone of the cathedral, the hush of the desert night settling over the chaos like a final judgment. Alex stepped closer to Lila, his hand outstretched, but hesitant, his mind still racing with the memory of her whispered vow. She reached for him, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his. Michael's voice cut through the quiet, sharp as a blade. "Don't pretend you're free of this, Lila. You're as deep in the blood as I am." Lila turned, her eyes clear and fierce. "You don't know me anymore, Michael. You never really did." She took a breath, her voice trembling but sure. "I stayed because I was scared. I stayed because I thought he was dead. But I won't stay now." Alex saw the truth in her eyes, the way she squared her shoulders like a soldier ready for her own battle. The woman he loved was still there, tired, haunted, but unbroken. Michael's lip curled in a snarl. "You're nothing without me, Lila. You'll die in the dark without my name to protect you." She shook her head, her tears shining in the pale light. "I'd rather die with Alex than live one more day in your shadow." For a moment, everything went still. The cathedral seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the promise of finality. Alex stepped in front of her, his voice quiet but resolute. "You heard her, Michael. She's done with your lies. And so am I." Michael's eyes darted between them, his chest heaving. In that moment, Alex saw it, the fear. The realization that the power he'd clung to for so long was slipping through his fingers. Lila moved closer to Alex, her hand finding his. Her voice was soft but strong. "I was always yours, Alex. Even when the world said you were gone, I felt you in every breath." Alex nodded once, his own eyes wet with the weight of the years between them. "And I was always coming back for you." Michael's shout shattered the quiet, but Alex didn't flinch. This was their stand, together, in the ruins of what was, ready to claim what would be. The night outside was a black sea, the wind howling through the broken stained glass like the cry of the dead. Inside, the cathedral was alive with the echo of ghosts, brothers lost, promises betrayed. Alex felt every beat of his heart like the drum of war, his senses razor-sharp as he faced the man who had once been his brother. Michael's pistol rose, his hand steady even as the rage in his eyes burned hotter than the desert sun. "You can't win this, Alex," he hissed. "You're outnumbered, outgunned." Alex's voice cut in, cold and calm. "I've been outnumbered before. I've been outgunned. But I've never been out of heart." He shifted his stance, his body flowing into the rhythm he'd learned in the kill houses and battlefields that had made him a SEAL. He wasn't just a soldier tonight. He was the embodiment of every oath he'd sworn, every life he'd fought to protect. Lila moved behind him, her hand gripping his arm, her breath warm on his neck. "I won't let him take you again, Alex. Not this time." He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes, the silent strength there grounding him. "He won't. I promise you." Michael's laughter was hollow, the sound of a man who knew the end was coming but couldn't stop it. "You think love will save you? Love didn't stop that bullet in your back. Love didn't keep you out of the grave." Alex's eyes didn't waver. "No, but love's why I crawled out of it." The words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. The men around Michael shifted, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Even the hired guns could feel it. This wasn't just another firefight. This was a reckoning. Michael's snarl twisted into a mask of fury. He raised the pistol, finger tightening on the trigger. Alex moved. The crack of the gunshot was deafening in the stone chamber, the echo rolling out into the night. But Alex was already there, already moving, his knife flashing in the half-light as he closed the distance. Michael stumbled back, the pistol slipping from his grasp, his eyes wide with shock and fury. Alex's voice was low and steady, the calm at the heart of the storm. "This ends tonight, Michael. One way or another." And in that breathless moment, Alex knew he wouldn't stop. Not until the final ghost was laid to rest. The cathedral exploded into chaos as Michael's shot tore through the air, shattering the silence like a hammer to glass. The bullet slammed into the wall behind Alex, sending a spray of stone dust into the flickering light. Alex didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his blade flashing in the darkness as he closed the gap between them. Michael stumbled back, his eyes wide with a flash of something close to fear. He swung the pistol wildly, but Alex was already there, his movements a deadly dance. The knife caught the edge of Michael's arm, blood welling up in a hot red line. Michael howled, his finger tightening reflexively on the trigger as the gun fired again. The bullet tore through a pillar, sending a shower of rubble down around them. Dust billowed, the acrid bite of it filling Alex's lungs. He ducked low, his hand gripping Michael's wrist like a vice, forcing the barrel away as they crashed into a broken pew. Wood splintered beneath their weight, the crack echoing through the hollow space. Michael snarled, his free hand swinging up to claw at Alex's face. Alex grunted as fingernails raked his cheek, but he didn't let go. He twisted, using his weight to slam Michael down against the stone floor. The gun clattered from Michael's grasp, skittering away into the darkness. Lila screamed as the two men crashed together, her voice raw with panic and fury. She scrambled for the pistol, her fingers closing around it just as Michael surged up again, his eyes wild and furious. "Stay back, Lila," Alex barked, his voice a sharp crack in the maelstrom. But she didn't listen. She stood there, the pistol trembling in her hands, her breath ragged. Her eyes locked on Michael, tears streaking the dust on her cheeks. "I'm done letting you take everything from me, Michael." Michael sneered, blood dripping from the cut on his arm. "You don't have the nerve, Lila. You never did." Alex's heart pounded, every muscle coiled. He knew this was the moment. The moment everything balanced on the edge of a blade. He pushed himself up, his voice low and final. "Lila, end this." The cathedral seemed to hold its breath as Lila raised the pistol, her fingers white-knuckled around the grip. Her hands shook, but her eyes were steady. Two dark flames locked on the man who had stolen everything from her. Dust swirled around them, the ruined altar looming behind her like a silent witness. Michael's laugh was low and bitter. "You think you can kill me, Lila? After everything?" He took a step closer, blood slick on his arm, his eyes gleaming with that cold certainty that had once bound her to him. "You're still mine. You always will be." She flinched at the words, her breath hitching in her throat. But Alex saw the way her shoulders squared, the way her jaw tightened. She was done being the widow in the shadows. She was done being afraid. "No," she said, her voice a quiet storm. "I was never yours, Michael. I was his. And I'm still his." Michael's snarl twisted into something almost mocking. "Then do it, Lila. Pull the trigger. Show me you're not the woman I broke." Silence fell, heavy as the desert night. Lila's finger tightened on the trigger, the weight of it a promise in her hand. Her lips parted, a single tear slipping down her cheek. Alex reached out, his voice soft but sure. "Lila, I'm here. You're not alone anymore." Her eyes flicked to him, that moment of connection holding the world still. Then she turned back to Michael, her breath a steady rhythm in the dark. "This is for everything you took from me," she said, her voice breaking but unshaken. And she pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the silence, Michael's body jerking back as the bullet found its mark. For a moment, he stood there, shock etched across his face. Then he staggered, his hands grasping at the wound, his mouth opening in a silent gasp. He fell to his knees, blood pooling around him in the dust. His eyes met Lila's one last time, something like disbelief in their depths. Then he collapsed, the last breath rattling in his chest. The cathedral was silent, but for Lila's ragged breathing, the echo of the shot still hanging in the air. Alex stepped forward, his hand on her shoulder. "It's over, Lila. He's gone." She turned to him, her face streaked with tears, her hand still clutching the smoking pistol. "No, Alex. It's just beginning." Outside, the desert wind howled like a wounded animal, the night alive with the distant crackle of radios and the roar of trucks pulling away from the compound. Inside the cathedral, the quiet was a different kind of violence, heavy and waiting, the weight of every choice pressing down on them. Alex crouched beside Michael's body, checking his pulse even though he knew there wouldn't be one. The blood was still warm, sticky on his fingers as he closed Michael's vacant eyes. "You chose this, Michael," he said softly, a final epitaph for a man he'd once called brother. Lila stood a few feet away, the pistol dangling from her fingers like a weight she couldn't let go of. She stared down at Michael's body, her face pale but set, the tremor in her hands the only sign of how close she'd come to breaking. Alex rose and moved to her, his hand brushing her shoulder. "You did what you had to do, Lila. Don't let his ghost haunt you." She looked up at him, her voice a whisper. "I'm not sure if I killed him, or the part of me that still believed he could change." He took the pistol from her gently, slipping it into his vest. Maybe both. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're free. Outside, the distant rumble of engines drew closer, the convoy of mercenaries realizing the tide had shifted. Alex turned to the broken doors, his mind already shifting to tactics, to survival. He could feel the pulse of the tracker in Michael's ring. Every beat another thread tying them to the world beyond these ruined walls. Logan's voice crackled in his ear. "Ghost, NATO's ready to move. They've seen everything. They're coming in hot." Alex's lips twitched in a grim smile. "Tell them the war is over. The truth is theirs now." Lila moved closer, her voice a quiet anchor. "What about us, Alex? What happens now?" He looked at her, his hand brushing the curve of her jaw, his eyes steady and sure. "Now we finish this together. No more ghosts. No more shadows. Just us." She nodded, a single tear tracing the dirt on her face. "Then let's end it. Together." The war wasn't over, but the darkness was breaking. And Alex knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. As the cathedral's shadows closed around them, the weight of survival pressed against Alex's chest, thick and heavy. He'd faced death on countless battlefields, but nothing compared to the war that raged inside him now. Lila's hand slipped into his, her touch a lifeline that steadied his breathing. She looked up at him, eyes raw and searching. "There's something you're not telling me, Alex. I can see it in your eyes." He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the broken floor beneath them. "It's not just about Michael. It never was." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Alex took a step back, his fingers brushing the dog tags that still hung around his neck. He could feel the weight of every mission, every secret, pressing down on him like an old wound that never fully healed. Before the ambush, before Michael's betrayal, "I found something," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Michael wasn't just selling weapons. He was selling names, ours. Coordinates, positions, entire teams sold to the highest bidder." Lila's breath caught, her face pale. "You're saying he was responsible for all of it? All those lives lost?" Alex nodded slowly. "My unit, they weren't just brothers. They were the price he paid for his empire. And when I found out, he tried to bury me with them." The silence between them was thick, the cathedral's ruined walls listening to confessions meant for no one else. Lila reached up, her palm warm against his cheek. "Why didn't you tell me before?" His eyes closed, the memories sharp as blades. "Because I didn't know if I could carry it and still come back to you. But now there's no room for secrets. Not anymore." She leaned in, her lips brushing his. "Then no more secrets, Alex. Not ever again." He nodded, his hand tightening around hers. "No more secrets. No more ghosts." Outside, the desert wind roared like a promise. And in the heart of the cathedral, they found the truth that would guide them forward. The desert night pressed close around them as Alex and Lila stepped out of the cathedral, their breath clouding in the cold air. The compound was alive with the sounds of the dying empire, mercenaries packing up, engines revving, the distant crackle of panicked radio chatter as Michael's carefully constructed kingdom began to crumble. Lila's eyes swept the broken stone walls, the crates of stolen weapons, the men moving like shadows in the night. "It's all falling apart," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years spent under someone else's thumb. Alex's jaw tightened. "It has to. This," he gestured to the chaos, "was built on the bones of the innocent. It can't stand." They moved through the compound together, each step a quiet testament to what they'd survived. The ring on Michael's finger pulsed in Alex's vest pocket, the final heartbeat of a traitor's life. He could feel the truth of it, the way it tied him to everything that had been stolen and everything that could still be redeemed. A mercenary stepped out of the shadows, his rifle half raised, eyes darting between them. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single moment, a test of what was left to fight for. Alex met his gaze, his voice calm and unwavering. "You're done here. Walk away, and you can still live with yourself." The man hesitated, his finger flexing on the trigger. But something in Alex's eyes, something that spoke of finality and forgiveness, made him lower the rifle. He turned and vanished into the night, another ghost of Michael's world slipping away. Lila let out a shaky breath. Do you think they'll ever stop running? Alex looked down at her, his eyes hard but kind. They'll run until they find something worth standing for. Just like we did. She nodded, her hand slipping into his. Then let's make sure they see it. The compound was crumbling, the empire turning to dust. But for the first time in a long time, Alex knew that what they were building, this quiet, defiant truth, was stronger than anything Michael had ever held. They moved through the heart of the compound, the dust swirling around them like memories they couldn't outrun. Alex's mind was clear, his senses alive with the weight of every breath, every step. Lila walked beside him, her eyes bright with the kind of hope that was forged in fire. A group of mercenaries blocked their path, their weapons slung across their chests, their faces shadowed and hard. Alex raised a hand, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. You've seen enough tonight. You know how this ends. One of the men stepped forward, his voice low and uncertain. And what about you, Ghost? You think walking out of here makes you any less dead? Alex's lips curved into a grim smile. I've been dead once already. This, he gestured to Lila, to the night, to the crumbling world around them. This is what I came back for. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then the man lowered his weapon, his eyes flicking Delilah. We're done here. Whatever's left, it's yours. They stepped aside, the silent acknowledgement of men who had seen too much and lived to regret it. Alex and Lila moved past them, the cold air filling their lungs, every breath a promise to keep going. At the edge of the compound, they paused. Lila turned to him, her voice quiet. I thought I'd lost you forever, Alex. That night, when the bullet stopped, I thought my heart did too. He reached for her, his thumb brushing the dirt from her cheek. You never lost me. I was always here. In every breath you took, in every beat of your heart. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was real. Then let's leave this place behind. Let's leave all of it behind. He nodded, his hand tied around hers. Together, as they stepped into the night, the compound burning behind them, Alex knew that some battles weren't won in blood and bullets. Some battles were won in the quiet, in the choice to keep walking no matter how heavy the ghosts. The desert stretched out before them, a wasteland of broken promises and endless horizon. Alex felt the weight of it all, the war they'd fought, the lives they'd taken, the ghosts they'd laid to rest. The wind howled around them, cold and sharp as a blade, but he welcomed it. It was honest. It didn't lie. Lila's hand was warm in his, her grip steady even as the night pressed in. She looked up at him, her voice soft but sure. What now, Alex? Where do we go from here? He paused, his eyes scanning the horizon. Wherever the fight is. But this time, he turned to her, his gaze unwavering. It's not about orders. It's about us. About what we choose to fight for. She smiled, her eyes wet but bright. Then I'll fight with you. No matter where the road leads. He nodded, the old soldier's calm settling over him like armor. Then let's walk it together. No more ghosts. No more running. They turned away from the compound, their steps sure and measured. Behind them, the last echoes of Michael's empire faded into the night, a kingdom built on lies, now nothing more than ash and memory. Alex felt the weight of his old life slipping from his shoulders, the burden of secrets and betrayal falling away with every step. In its place, something new, something fragile but unbreakable. The quiet strength of two souls who had survived everything the world could throw at them. He squeezed Lila's hand, his voice a low promise in the darkness. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's my oath to you. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice a quiet breath. And mine to you. The desert night swallowed them up, the wind singing through the dunes like the whispers of the dead. But Alex didn't fear the darkness anymore. He had chosen his path. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking it alone. The desert night fell in around them like a shroud as Alex and Lila pressed deeper into the shadows of the broken compound. The cold wind cut across their faces, but they didn't flinch. It felt almost cleansing, scouring the last ashes of Michael's betrayal from their skin. They moved past crates of stolen rifles and rusted-out trucks, the wind rattling the broken windows of the bunker behind them. Each step was deliberate, measured, Alex's instincts razor-sharp, Lila's determination shining in her eyes. They'd survived the wreckage of Michael's world, but the ghosts weren't done yet. Lila paused, her hand tightening in Alex's. "Do you hear that?" He tilted his head, listening. Beyond the moan of the wind and the echo of their breathing, there was a low, rhythmic thud, a heartbeat in the sand. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing as he caught the flicker of headlights, distant and uncertain. "Patrols," he murmured. "Probably Michael's last loyal dogs. They'll be searching for answers, or for revenge." Lila's voice was calm, but he could hear the tremor in it. "What do we do?" Alex's lips pressed into a thin line, his mind already working. "We keep moving. Stay in the shadows. We're not done yet." He looked down at her, the lines of exhaustion and fire both etched into her face. "You're with me, Lila. We don't stop now." She nodded, her jaw set. "I'm with you. Until the last breath." Together they slipped away from the compound, every step carrying them deeper into the desert's cold embrace. Behind them, the last echoes of Michael's empire fell silent. But ahead, there was still one final mission, one final promise to keep. Alex knew it in his bones. The ghosts of the past might never truly fade. But he was done running from them. Now, he'd carry them forward into whatever came next. The moon rose high above them, a cold silver eye watching as Alex and Lila trudged across the dunes. The sand shifted beneath their boots, the night alive with whispers and the quiet rasp of wind-blown grit. They paused by the wreckage of an old water tower, its rusted skeleton a monument to the desert's indifference. Lila leaned against the corroded metal, her breath coming in short, measured gasps. "Alex, there's something I need to say. Before we go any further." He turned to her, his eyes steady and open. "You don't have to, Lila. Not tonight." She shook her head, her hair whipping around her face. "No, I do. I need you to hear this." She took a slow breath, gathering the words like a soldier gathering courage. "I stayed with Michael because I thought I had no choice. But a part of me never stopped believing you were alive. Even when I saw your grave, even when he said he watched you die. I felt you out there. Like a heartbeat I couldn't silence." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The truth in her words cut deeper than any blade, raw and searing. "I never blamed you, Lila. I knew what he was. And I knew what we were." She stepped closer, her hands trembling as they found his chest. "I wanted to tell you. All those nights I lay awake beside him. I thought of you, of the promises we made. And I kept them, Alex. Even if the world didn't." He reached up, his fingers brushing a tear from her cheek. "We're here now. That's all that matters. The past, its ashes. But we're still breathing." She nodded, her lips parting as she leaned into him. Their kiss was soft and unhurried. No fire, no fury, just the quiet certainty of two souls who'd survived the same storm. In that moment, Alex felt it, the weight of everything they'd lost, everything they'd reclaimed. And he knew he'd carry it with him, not as a burden, but as a promise. The horizon began to pale, the first hints of dawn creeping over the dunes like a promise of something new. Alex and Lila moved with careful purpose, their steps sure but silent. The desert around them was alive with the low growl of engines, Michael's last enforcers, still searching for the man who refused to stay dead. Alex crouched at the crest of a dune, his eyes scanning the glint of headlights far below. "We're close to the border," he murmured, his voice low. "If we can reach the old NATO safe house in the pass, we'll have cover and leverage." Lila knelt beside him, her breath warm against his cheek. "Will they follow us there?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "They'll follow, but they won't get what they're after." He tapped the tracker in his pocket, the ring he'd taken from Michael's hand, the final piece of evidence. "This ends when the truth is in the right hands. Not before." She laid her hand on his chest, her eyes unwavering. "Then let's finish it. Together." They rose, slipping down the dune like whispers on the wind. Every movement was a calculated risk, every breath another chance to see dawn. The trucks prowled the flats below, sweeping the sands with cold headlights. But Alex knew the terrain, knew how to move like a ghost in a place where shadows ruled. As they crept past an abandoned checkpoint, Lila reached for his hand. Her grip was strong, steady. I'm not afraid anymore, Alex. Not of the darkness. Not of the men who think they own it. He looked back at her, his jaw tightening with resolve. Good. Because we're not theirs to claim. Not anymore. The trucks turned away, oblivious to the two figures vanishing into the deeper dunes. Alex felt the old calm settle over him, the calm of a man who knew the mission and would see it through. He whispered to her as they pressed on. Almost there. Just hold on a little longer. The night bled into the thin light of dawn as Alex and Lila reached the narrow pass that cut through the ancient cliffs. The air smelled of dust and cold stone, the silence broken only by the ragged rhythm of their breath. Alex led the way, every footstep chosen with the care of a man who had survived too many wars to take any ground for granted. At the mouth of the pass, they paused. The safe house was a ruin, half buried in sand, its battered door hanging by a single rusted hinge. But it was shelter, and it was the final waypoint in a journey that had started with betrayal and ended in blood. Alex pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was cold and close, the faint scent of old gun oil clinging to the stones. He swept the room with his rifle, every shadow a possible threat, until he was sure. He turned to Lila, his voice a low murmur. We'll rest here. Just for a moment. She nodded, sinking onto a crate, her shoulders slumping as the adrenaline finally ebbed. I never thought we'd make it this far, she said softly. Alex crouched beside her, his fingers brushing her hair back from her face. We're not done yet. The world needs to know what he did. The men he betrayed. The brothers we lost. Her eyes glistened in the half-light. And when the world knows, what then? He hesitated, the weight of years settling in his bones. Then he took her hand, pressing it to his heart. Then we live, Lila. Not for the past, but for the promise we made each other. For what's left to build. Outside, the wind howled through the pass, but inside, there was only the quiet thrum of two hearts refusing to break. And in that battered, blood-stained shelter, Alex realized this wasn't just a war for vengeance. It was a baptism in fire and blood, a chance to wash away the ghosts and step into something new. The first light of dawn seeped through the cracked windows of the safe house, painting the battered walls in a pale glow. Alex crouched at the doorway, watching the horizon with the eyes of a soldier who had learned to read the wind. The world outside was hushed, but the silence felt like a promise, a chance to start again, if they could survive the final push. Behind him, Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, the weight of exhaustion and resolve both etched into the lines of her face. She cleaned the small pistol she'd taken from Michael, each motion steady, her movements slow but deliberate. There was no fear in her now, only the cold fire of a woman who had faced her demons and refused to kneel. Do you think they'll find us here? She asked softly, her voice echoing in the stone quiet. Alex didn't look back. They'll try, but they don't know this ground like I do. He shifted his stance, his mind working through contingencies, every possibility a puzzle he'd learned to solve in the dark. If they come, we'll be ready. Lila rose, crossing the room to him. She touched his arm, her eyes searching his. You're not alone this time, Alex. Whatever comes, we face it together. He looked at her, the weight of the promise in her voice cutting through the shadows that still clung to his heart. I know, and that changes everything. Outside, the wind carried the faint rumble of engines, mercenaries combing the dunes, hunting for a ghost who wouldn't die. Alex watched them, his breath steady. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding. He turned to Lila, his voice a quiet vow. When this ends, Lila, we leave this behind. We leave the war behind. She nodded, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. Then let's finish it, Alex. Let's end this. In that battered shelter, they stood side by side, two souls forged in fire, unbreakable and unafraid. The wind howled through the pass, carrying the taste of grit and cold steel as Alex scanned the horizon. He felt the pulse of the tracker in his vest, Every beat a reminder of the truth he carried, evidence of betrayal, of lives stolen and sold. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice, and he would see it done. Lila's breath was soft behind him, her fingers brushing his shoulder. "They're close," she murmured. He nodded, his eyes narrowing. The convoy was moving across the flats, their headlights flickering in the dawn like hungry eyes. Mercenaries, hardened men who had followed Michael's blood-soaked promises. But Michael was gone, and the men he'd used were about to face the reckoning he'd fled. Alex checked the chamber of his rifle, each round a quiet promise. "We don't have to fight them all, Lila. We just have to survive." She reached for his hand, her grip steady despite the fear that licked at the edges of her voice. "I trust you, Alex. I always have." He turned to her, his thumb brushing the dirt from her cheek. "Then trust me now. Stay low. Move only when I move. I'll get us out of this." The trucks crawled closer, engines growling as the mercenaries fanned out. Alex counted them, his mind cold and clear. 3 trucks, a dozen men. A fight he'd have once called a suicide run. But he wasn't alone anymore. He had something worth living for. As the first truck crested the rise, Alex slipped back into the shelter, his breath steady. "They'll come to us. Let them. I'll hold them here." Lila's eyes searched his, her voice soft but sure. "I'm with you, Alex. All the way." He took a deep breath, the old calm settling into his bones. Then he kissed her forehead, his voice low and certain. "For them. For us. This ends now." The war had come to them. But Alex Cole was done running. And tonight, he'd show them what a SEAL's final mission really looked like. The rumble of engines filled the pass, dust churning in the early morning light as the trucks pulled to a halt. Mercenaries spilled from the vehicles, their movements swift and precise. Professional soldiers, but not brothers. Not like the men Alex had fought beside in another life. He crouched behind a broken wall, his rifle balanced against the stone. Beside him, Lila clutched the small pistol, her breath ragged but her hands steady. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not out of heart. Alex tapped the ring in his pocket, feeling the weight of Michael's betrayal humming against his chest. It wasn't just a symbol. It was the key to everything, the final nail in the coffin of a man who'd tried to bury him. A mercenary called out, his voice echoing in the pass. "Come out. We know you're here. This doesn't have to end in blood." Alex's eyes flicked to Lila, his voice a quiet promise. "Stay low. No matter what." She nodded once, her jaw set, her eyes bright with defiance. "I won't leave you." He shifted his grip, sighting down the barrel of his rifle. "Then we finish it together." The mercenaries moved closer, their rifles sweeping the shadows. Alex waited, his breath a steady rhythm in the cold air. Then, with the calm of a man who had walked through hell and come back whole, he pulled the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, the first mercenary dropping without a sound. Chaos erupted in the past, shouts, the crackle of gunfire, the whine of bullets sparking off stone. Alex moved like a ghost, each shot precise, each movement deliberate. Beside him, Lila fired from cover, her hands steady, her face hard. She wasn't the woman who had knelt at his grave anymore. She was the woman who would stand with him, no matter what. The fight raged around them, the dawn burning gold above the cliffs. And in the middle of it, Alex felt the weight of the ring in his pocket, the final proof, the final promise. Tonight, the rings of war would bind the truth to the light. The pass echoed with the chaos of gunfire, the mercenaries moving like shadows in the dust. Alex ducked behind the broken wall, his breath steady as he reloaded, each round a silent vow. Lila crouched beside him, her hands trembling, but her eyes clear and bright. A bullet cracked against the stone inches from his head. He didn't flinch, just shifted his weight, sighting down the barrel of his rifle. "They're scattering," he murmured. "They're fighting shadows, not soldiers." Lila's voice was tight. "Then let's show them what real soldiers look like." Alex smiled, a grim, hard smile that spoke of battles won and lost, of promises kept in blood. "Stay with me. That's all I need." She nodded, her face pale but her spine straight. Always. A mercenary broke from cover, his rifle up, eyes wild. Alex squeezed the trigger, the shot punching through the silence with finality. The man fell, dust billowing around him like a shroud. Another followed, then another, each one a final echo of Michael's betrayal. They moved with the desperation of men who knew their world was dying, but Alex moved with the calm of a man who had already buried his ghosts. He felt Lila's hand on his shoulder, her voice a soft anchor in the maelstrom. "They're almost done. I can feel it." He nodded, his gaze sweeping the chaos. "One last push. Then we end this." He slipped from cover, his rifle barking, each shot clean and final. The last mercenary stumbled, his weapon clattering to the stone. The silence that followed was heavy, the dawn painting the pass in gold and blood. Alex turned to Lila, his breath ragged. "It's over." She shook her head, her eyes fierce. "No, not until the world knows. Not until the truth is free." He reached into his vest, pulling out the ring, the final piece of Michael's empire. "Then let's make sure they see it. Let's make sure they never forget." And together, they stepped into the light of the rising sun, ready to finish what Michael had started and claim what was theirs. The dawn cast a cold light over the aftermath, the last echoes of gunfire swallowed by the wind. Alex and Lila stood among the wreckage, their breath misting in the air, the silence between them deep and heavy. Around them lay the fallen mercenaries, the final testament to Michael's broken empire. Alex knelt by one of the dead men, his gloved hand brushing over the patch on the man's shoulder, a unit he didn't recognize, a loyalty bought with blood money. He closed the man's eyes with a quiet sigh. "This wasn't your fight. You just didn't know it yet." Lila watched him, her face pale but resolute. "How many more, Alex? How many lives did Michael steal to build his kingdom?" Alex rose slowly, his gaze hard as he scanned the bodies. "Too many. But it ends here. No more ghosts." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and sure. "We're not them, Lila. We're not defined by what he did." She looked into his eyes, her own brimming with a fierce, quiet strength. "I know, but we can't let it be forgotten, either. We owe them that much." He nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in his bones. "We will. I promise you that." The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of a voice from the earpiece in Alex's vest. Logan's voice, calm and certain. "Ghost, we're seeing it all. NATO's ready to move on your signal." Alex's lips pressed into a hard line. "Tell them the evidence is secure. Michael's ring. It's all here." Logan hesitated. "And what about you, brother? What's your next move?" Alex looked at Lila, her hand wrapped around his. He took a slow breath. "We're coming home. But this time, we're writing our own orders." He clicked the mic off, his eyes steady. Lila's fingers tightened around his, her voice a whisper. "Whatever comes next, Alex, I'm with you." He drew her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "Always, Lila. Always." The wind roared around them, but in that moment, they were unbreakable. Two souls bound by blood, by war, and by the promise of something more. The sun climbed higher, its pale light glinting off the battered ring Alex held in his hand. Michael's ring, once a symbol of lies and betrayal, now the key to justice. Lila watched him turn it over in his fingers, her eyes searching his face for the truth of what it meant. That ring, it was everything to him. She murmured, her voice soft but sure. "Proof of his power. His claim on me." Alex's jaw tightened, his thumb brushing the cold metal. "Not anymore. Now it's the evidence that ends this." He met her gaze, his eyes hard, but full of something else, something that had nothing to do with war or revenge. "It's not your burden to carry anymore, Lila." She shook her head, her dark hair catching the wind. "It was never about the ring, Alex. It was about the promises it represented, the way he twisted them." She took a breath, steadying herself. "But this is my choice. My stand. I won't let his lies define me anymore." He reached out, his hand resting against her cheek. "Then let's bury it. Right here. Let the world see the truth in its ashes." She nodded, her fingers brushing his. Together, They walked to a small outcrop of rock, the desert stretching endless and bright around them. Alex knelt, pressing the ring into the sand with the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they'd fought to reclaim. Lila spoke softly, her words a quiet benediction. For the lives he took, for the love he tried to steal. Let this be the end of his shadow. Alex rose, his hand slipping into hers. The wind caught the last breath of the ring's glint, carrying it away like dust. He looked down at her, his voice a low promise. No more shadows. No more ghosts. She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. Only us. Only what we choose to build. The desert was silent around them, but in that silence, they found the beginning of something new, a truth stronger than any lie. The cathedral loomed behind them, its shattered walls catching the early light. It felt like a monument to everything they had survived, a place of blood and betrayal, but also the birthplace of their final stand. Alex turned back to it one last time, his eyes lingering on the cracked stone and broken glass. Lila stood beside him, her voice quiet. It feels like a grave, but also like a monument. He nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in his chest. A grave for the past, but a monument to what comes next. She reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. Then let's leave it here. Let the ghosts rest. Alex stepped forward, his boots crunching over the blood-soaked floor. He paused at the altar, the memory of Michael's last stand still etched in the air. He drew a deep breath, his voice steady and clear. For the brothers we lost. For the vows we keep. His hand brushed the dog tags at his neck, a final salute to the men who had stood with him in the darkness. Lila moved beside him, her face set in quiet strength. For the love they tried to bury, but couldn't. He turned to her, his eyes locked on hers. For us, Lila. For the life we're going to build. She smiled, her tears catching the light. For us. Together, they turned away from the altar, from the ghosts and the blood. The cathedral would stand as a memory of what was lost and of what they refused to surrender. As they stepped into the dawn, Alex felt the final weight of it lift. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a ghost. He was a man with a mission still, one last promise to keep. And with Lila by his side, he knew he would see it through. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a sea of gold and heat as Alex and Lila made their way back to the edge of the compound. The world felt still in that moment, the wind carrying the faint scent of gun oil and sweat, the taste of battle still sharp on their tongues. Alex crouched by a rusted-out truck, his fingers brushing over the bullet holes in the metal. He could feel the weight of every shot fired, every breath stolen in the name of power. This was Michael's war, he said quietly. But it's done now. Lila leaned against the truck, her arms wrapped around herself. I used to think I'd never stop feeling like I was his prisoner. Like he'd carved his mark into me, and I'd never be free of it. He turned to her, his eyes dark and steady. You're not his prisoner, Lila. You never were. You're stronger than he ever understood. She looked at him, her breath shuddering out in a quiet laugh. And you're the only one who ever saw that. Even when I didn't. He brushed his thumb across her cheek, the touch light and warm. I see you. I always have. The rumble of distant engines pulled their attention back to the horizon. Logan's voice crackled in Alex's earpiece. Ghost, the NATO team is inbound. They'll be here soon to secure the site and the evidence. Alex's shoulders straightened, the old calm settling over him. Tell them to bring everything. I'm not leaving until this is done right. Lila nodded, her voice soft but resolute. We'll finish it, Alex. Together. He gave her a small, fierce smile. Together. The desert was waiting, the echoes of the war still fading in the wind. But in that quiet moment, Alex felt the surety of something stronger than vengeance. Stronger than the ghosts of the past. He felt the promise of a future worth fighting for, and he knew he wouldn't let it slip away. The desert sun beat down with unrelenting heat, washing the sand and stone in a harsh glare. Alex stood at the crest of a small dune, the NATO convoy crawling up the horizon like a promise of finality. Dust rose in shimmering waves, the distant thrum of engines quiet him to the ghosts of the past. Beside him, Lila shaded her eyes, her fingers brushing the ring Alex still carried, Michael's final legacy. It's almost over, isn't it? She said softly. Alex nodded, the weight of the ring cold and solid in his palm. It is. Once NATO sees what's on this tracker, Michael's deals, the names he sold, no one will be able to deny the truth. Logan's voice crackled in his earpiece, calm and unwavering. Ghost, confirm you're secure. We're 15 minutes out. Eyes in the sky say the area's clear. Alex clicked his mic, his voice steady. Confirmed. We're in position. Lila's eyes met his, a flicker of something like relief in their depths. What happens to us after, Alex? After the truth? He reached out, brushing his thumb along her jawline. We find out. Together. As the convoy drew closer, Alex dropped to one knee, setting the ring on a battered crate. He opened a small transmitter box, its indicator light blinking steady and green. He pressed the ring into place, locking it in. The pulse of data flickered on the small screen, a silent testament to everything they'd fought for. The wind caught Lila's hair, blowing it across her face. She didn't flinch. He thought he could bury you, Alex. That he could bury all of this. But here you are. He looked up at her, his voice low and sure. I came back for you. For the truth. For everyone he tried to silence. The NATO trucks ground to a halt in a halo of dust, soldiers moving with disciplined precision. One of them, a young officer with sharp eyes and a calm voice, approached Alex. Lieutenant Commander Cole, we're here to take it from here. Alex rose, his hand still wrapped around Lila's. Then take it. Let the world see. The soldier nodded, taking the transmitter and ring with careful hands. And as the weight of it left Alex's grip, he felt the final burden of Michael's lies slip away, like dust in the desert wind. The NATO team worked quickly, securing the perimeter and gathering the last echoes of Michael's shattered empire. Dust billowed around the armored trucks as soldiers fanned out, eyes sharp and rifles ready. But the fight was over. Only the final truths remained. Alex and Lila stood apart, their hands clasped tight, the bond between them stronger than the silence that had once threatened to swallow them whole. She turned to him, her eyes shadowed but bright. You could walk away, Alex. Let them take it all and never look back. He shook his head, his voice low. No. This is my responsibility. My brother's, my oath. I won't walk away from it. She watched him, her breath catching in the warm desert air. And what about me? What about us? He turned fully to her, his hands gentle on her arms. You're my choice, Lila. Not this war, not this blood. You. Always you. Tears slipped down her cheeks, shining like desert pearls in the light. Then I'll stand with you. No matter what comes. A NATO officer approached, the ring and transmitter in hand. Commander Cole, we have what we need. We'll take it from here, official debrief, secured channels. We can fly you out with us. Alex's eyes stayed on Lila's, his voice steady. No. We'll find our own way home. The officer nodded, understanding in his gaze. We'll see that the truth gets out, sir. The world will know. As the soldiers loaded the last crates of evidence, Lila leaned into Alex's side, her voice a soft vow. You've given them justice. Now, let's give ourselves peace. He wrapped his arm around her, feeling the quiet strength in her body. No more running. No more ghosts. Just us. The wind carried the last echoes of war into the desert beyond. And in that quiet, Alex knew that for the first time in years, he could breathe. The sun began its slow descent, painting the desert in deep golds and burnt orange. Alex watched the NATO convoy disappear down the winding road, the trucks a final echo of the war that had stolen so much and given back only scars. He stood silent, the battered cathedral at his back, the ring now just a memory in someone else's hands. Lila moved beside him, her eyes scanning the empty horizon. So, what now? He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the dog tags at his neck. Now we choose. For the first time in a long time, we get to choose. She smiled, a soft, tired curve of her lips. And what do you choose, Alex? He turned to her, the desert wind tugging at his hair. I choose you. I choose us. And whatever road that leads us down, I'll walk it with you. She reached up, brushing her fingers along his jaw. Even if it's not easy? His laugh was low, warm. Especially if it's not easy. They stood together in the fading light, two warriors who had survived the worst the world could throw at them. The silence between them was no longer empty, it was a promise. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. We'll find a way. Somewhere far from this. Somewhere that's ours. She leaned into him, her voice a soft echo of hope. Then let's leave this behind. Let's leave the war here. He nodded, the weight of the past finally slipping away. It's time. The wind whispered through the ruins, a quiet benediction. And as they turned away from the cathedral's broken walls, Alex knew that whatever waited beyond the dunes, it was theirs to claim. Days later, Alex and Lila stood on the edge of a NATO airstrip, the wind whipping across the tarmac in short, sharp gusts. The sky overhead was the cold, perfect blue of a world that had moved on from the war that had consumed them. A uniformed officer approached, his face serious but respectful. Lieutenant Commander Cole, the tribunal has reviewed the evidence. Your mission is done, sir. Alex nodded, his posture straight despite the weight of the years. Good. Let the world see the truth. Let them bury the lies once and for all. The officer saluted, his voice soft. You did your duty. More than most. Alex returned the salute, his fingers brushing the edge of his cap. But when he turned back to Lila, his face softened, the soldier's steel replaced by something human and tender. She reached up, her fingertips brushing the edge of the scar at his jaw. You're not just a soldier, Alex. You're so much more. He caught her hand, holding it to his heart. So are you, Lila. More than he ever understood. More than I ever deserved. The plane's engines roared to life, the sound of departure. A final exclamation mark on the chapter they were leaving behind. Lila leaned her head against his shoulder, her breath warm and even. Wherever we go next, it's our choice, Alex, she whispered. He smiled, the weight of everything lifting with each breath. And I'll choose you. Every time. The wind tugged at their clothes as they turned away from the past. And in that moment, soldier and widow, survivor and witness, they found something the world had tried to bury, a reason to keep going, a reason to believe, a reason to live. The NATO airstrip fell behind them as Alex and Lila boarded a battered Humvee, the engine's low growl blending with the desert's hush. The world outside seemed washed clean by the light of early morning, the dunes rolling away in endless gold. But the war was still in Alex's blood, echoes of orders and battle cries that wouldn't fade so easily. He glanced over at Lila, her face turned toward the window, her hair catching the sun like burnished copper. She looked peaceful, but he knew the weight of what they'd survived still clung to her, just as it clung to him. What are you thinking? He asked quietly. She turned to him, her eyes clear. I'm thinking, it's not over. Even with Michael gone, the ghosts don't disappear so easily. He nodded, the truth of it settling deep in his chest. No, they don't. But they don't define us either. The driver, a young soldier with tired eyes, cast a glance back at them. We're taking you as far as the border. From there, you're free to go wherever you want. Alex offered a small, tight smile. Good. That's all we need. The Humvee rattled over the cracked road, the desert stretching out like an old promise. In the silence between them, Alex reached out, his fingers brushing Lila's wrist. She turned her hand, her fingers intertwining with his. She spoke softly, her voice a vow. Wherever we go, it has to be ours, Alex. Not borrowed. Not stolen. He squeezed her hand, his voice low. It will be. I promise you, Lila. From this day forward, it's us. No more ghosts. The wind carried the words away, but the promise stayed. And as the Humvee carried them deeper into the dawn, Alex felt something shift inside him, a quiet certainty that for the first time in years, he was done fighting other people's wars. From here on out, it was only the battle to build something real. They crossed the border at dawn, the sun cresting the hills and washing the battered truck in pale gold. The checkpoint was manned by a single guard, his rifle slung low as he watched them pass with wary eyes. But there was no challenge, no shout to stop. The world seemed to hold its breath as they slipped from one life into another. Alex kept his hand on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his gaze steady on the empty road ahead. But his thoughts were with Lila, how her hand trembled in his, how her eyes never wavered when the world fell apart. "You're thinking too loud," she said, her voice soft but sure. He glanced over, a smile ghosting across his lips. "I was just remembering how close we came to never having this moment." She reached for his hand, her touch warm against the chill of the morning. "We're here, Alex. We survived." He nodded, the memory of blood and betrayal still vivid but fading. "We did. And now, it's on us to decide what comes next." Lila's eyes held his, her voice fierce. "I don't want to live in fear of the past anymore. I don't want to keep running from shadows." He turned to her, his voice low and certain. "Then we don't. We stand. We fight for something worth keeping." She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. "Then I swear it. No more running. No more looking back." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "That's our oath, Lila. Yours and mine." The road ahead stretched empty and endless, but for the first time, it felt like a promise instead of a punishment. And as the sun rose higher, they drove on two souls bound by an oath stronger than any vow spoken in the dark. The road led them to a small village at the edge of the desert, a place of sun-bleached walls and narrow streets that smelled of cooking fires and fresh bread. The village seemed untouched by the war, its quiet resilience a balm to Alex's battle-scarred heart. He parked the Humvee by a crumbling wall, the engine ticking as it cooled. Lila slipped from the seat, her gaze sweeping the quiet square. "It feels safe here," she said, her voice hushed. Alex nodded, his eyes scanning the windows and doorways. "Old habits, old instincts." "It does. But it's more than that. It feels like a place where we could start over." She turned to him, her smile shy but real. "Do you really think we can? After everything?" He stepped close, his hand cupping her cheek. "I know we can, because we've already survived the worst of it. The rest, we'll build it together." The weight of her smile was a promise, warm and bright. "Then let's start here, Alex. Let's start small." They found a room in a quiet inn, a small space with whitewashed walls and a single window that opened onto the square. Alex dropped their packs in the corner, his shoulders finally relaxing as he looked around. It was nothing fancy, but it was enough. He turned to Lila, her eyes bright in the slanting light. "Home?" he asked softly. She nodded, her fingers brushing his jaw. "Home." And in that moment, the world felt smaller, quieter, no echoes of gunfire, no shadows waiting to claim them. Just the promise of a room, a window, and the chance to begin again. The sun was setting by the time Alex stepped out onto the small balcony, the village square quiet below him. He leaned against the weathered railing, his mind turning over everything they'd fought through, everything they'd left behind. The war had marked him, scarred his body, etched itself into his bones. But as he watched the last light of day bleed into the sky, he realized that those marks weren't what defined him anymore. Lila stepped out beside him, her hair catching the glow of the setting sun. She didn't speak, she didn't have to. Her presence was enough. A quiet strength, an anchor in the storm that had once threatened to swallow them whole. Alex reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the pulse at her wrist. "You ever wonder if the ghosts ever really go away?" She tilted her head, her gaze steady. "I think they fade. If we let them." He let out a slow breath, the desert night cool against his skin. "Then let's let them. Let's live for more than just survival." She pressed close, her voice a whisper. "Then promise me one thing. No matter how far we go, no matter what comes next, promise me we keep choosing this. Us." He turned to her, his hand cradling her face. "I promise, Lila. In every breath, in every choice, us." The last rays of sun slipped behind the horizon, but the night didn't feel so dark anymore. And as they stood together on that quiet balcony, Alex knew that whatever battles still lay ahead, this was the one he'd fight for until his last breath. The night fell over the village like a warm blanket, the quiet hum of life seeping through the cracked walls of their small room. Alex sat at the edge of the narrow bed, his hands running over the worn fabric of his shirt. The sounds of laughter drifted in from the square, a distant echo of a world that felt almost within reach. Lila stood by the window, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of lanterns outside. She turned to him, her voice gentle. "You look like a man still waiting for the next war." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "It's hard to let it go, Lila. Hard to let yourself believe there's something after the fighting." She crossed the room, kneeling in front of him. Her fingers brushed the old scars at his collarbone, her touch soft and sure. "We're here. We're alive. That has to mean something." He took a shuddering breath, his shoulders relaxing under her hand. "It does. It means everything." His voice was low, but it held a note of quiet wonder. "I spent so long thinking the only thing I could be was a soldier. But now," he reached out, cupping her cheek. "Now I want to be the man who deserves this. Deserves you." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "You always were, Alex. Even when you didn't believe it." He leaned forward, their foreheads touching. The room seemed to shrink around them, just a simple space, walls and roof and window, but it felt like the whole world. He pressed a kiss to her brow, a silent vow whispered in the stillness. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from somewhere unseen. And in that fragile peace, Alex felt the last of the desert's ghosts slip away. Morning came slow and soft, the first light of the sun painting the cracked walls of their room in pale gold. Alex woke to the sound of Lila's quiet breathing, her hair tangled across the pillow, her hand resting over his heart. He watched her for a long moment, the simple peace of her presence filling something hollow inside him. When she stirred, her eyes blinking open, she found him watching. "You're up early," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Didn't want to waste this. Waking up beside you." She leaned into his touch, her eyes soft. "I never thought I'd get to see you like this." In the quiet, he took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "This is what I fought for. Not medals, not orders. Just this, us." She smiled, a slow, radiant curve of her lips. "Then let's make it count. Let's make today ours." They rose together, moving through the motions of the morning with a quiet intimacy, hands brushing at the basin, sharing the simple warmth of tea brewed over a small flame. Outside, the village stirred to life, the clatter of carts and the low hum of voices a gentle backdrop. Alex watched her as she pulled her shawl around her shoulders, the morning sun catching the faint smile on her lips. "You're beautiful," he said quietly, the words feeling almost new on his tongue. She turned, her laughter soft but sure. "You're biased. But I'll take it." He caught her hand as they stepped out into the day, the weight of the world lifting with each step they took away from the war. And as the sun rose higher, Alex felt the promise of it, the chance to live, to love, without the shadow of the past. Later that day, they stood at the edge of the village, the desert stretching out in waves of heat and memory. Alex held the small pouch in his hand. Inside, the last relic of the man he'd once called brother, Michael's ring. The final piece of the past, and the last burden he was ready to lay down. Lila watched him, her expression calm but full of understanding. "You don't have to do this, Alex. Not for me." He shook his head, his fingers tightening around the pouch. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. For the men who never came back. For the boy who thought he'd be a soldier forever." She reached up, her palm resting against his cheek. "Then do it. Let it go." He took a slow breath, then knelt, pressing the pouch into the sand. The wind caught at the edges of his hair, carrying the faint taste of salt and sun. "For my brothers. For the truth. For the chance to be more than a weapon." He rose, dusting the sand from his hands. The weight of the ring was gone, but the promise of what it meant stayed, a quiet vow written in the lines of his face and the strength of the woman at his side. Lila took his hand, her fingers strong and sure. "It's done. The past is behind us." He looked out at the horizon, the endless expanse of sky and earth. "Then let's leave it there. And keep moving forward." Together, they turned away from the grave they'd built in the desert sand, two souls unbroken, ready for the road that waited. The sun was high by the time they returned to the village, the air warm and sweet with the scent of cooking fires. Alex walked through the narrow streets with Lila's hand in his, the rhythm of their steps a quiet testament to the choice they'd made. They found a small market in the square, the stalls bright with woven blankets and baskets of fruit. Lila paused to examine a length of cloth, her fingers tracing the vivid colors. Alex watched her, a small smile playing at the edges of his mouth. "Thinking of decorating our new home," he teased. She turned to him, her smile soft. "Maybe. I want to make it ours." He reached for her, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Then we will. One day at a time." They bartered for a basket of dates and a small pot of honey, the old woman at the stall smiling at the quiet laughter that passed between them. As they walked back through the square, Alex caught the edge of Lila's shawl, pulling her close for a moment. "This is what we fought for, Lila. Not medals, not vengeance. Just this." She nodded, her eyes bright. "Then let's make sure it lasts." The world outside might never be free of war, but here, in the hush of the village and the warmth of her smile, Alex found something he'd thought he'd lost forever, a reason to keep going, a reason to believe. And in that simple, quiet day, he found the first breath of a future he was ready to claim. The soft murmur of the market drifted around them as Alex and Lila made their way back to the small room they called home. The sun was high overhead, painting the world in gold and shadow. Alex carried the small basket of dates they'd bought, his steps measured, the weight of the past slipping further away with each breath. Lila walked beside him, her shawl trailing in the breeze. She watched the children playing in the square, the bright colors of their clothes a vivid reminder that life still thrived, even in a place marked by old scars. She turned to Alex, her smile warm but tinged with something unspoken. "Do you ever wonder if the ghosts are truly gone?" she asked softly. He paused, his gaze drifting to the cracked walls of the village houses, the faded murals of warriors and saints. "I think they never really go away. But they don't have to haunt us anymore, Lila. Not if we choose to let them rest." She slipped her hand into his, her fingers warm and certain. "Then let's choose that. Every day." They stepped into the shade of a narrow alley, the air cool and still. Alex let his hand drift to her waist, pulling her closer. Her breath caught, the soft hitch in her chest a sound he'd come to know. Fear and hope twined together. "This life, it's fragile," she whispered. He leaned down, his forehead brushing hers. "So are we. But we're still standing." She closed her eyes, her voice a promise. "Then let's keep standing. Together." He kissed her, slow and certain, tasting the dust and the sweetness of dates on her lips. In that quiet moment, the ghosts fell silent, and all that remained was the steady rhythm of two hearts refusing to let go. The sun set over the village, the sky streaked in fire and rose as Alex and Lila climbed the narrow stairs to the roof of the small inn. The world below them softened in the last light of day, the laughter of children and the low hum of distant music weaving a fragile peace around them. Alex sank onto the low stone wall, his eyes tracing the edge of the horizon. Lila sat beside him, her shawl wrapped tight against the cool evening air. She watched the shifting light, the way the wind stirred the dust into small whirlwinds. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. He nodded, his voice low. "It is. But it's not just the view. It's everything we've survived to see it." She turned to him, her hand brushing his. "You're still thinking like a soldier, Alex." He gave a small smile, the lines of his face softening. "Maybe. But I'm trying to think like a man, too. Like a man who's finally allowed to want something for himself." She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "And what do you want?" He met her gaze, the truth clear in his voice. "You. A life where I can wake up beside you and know the world can't take it away. A life that's ours." Tears slipped down her cheeks, the last rays of sun catching in the glimmer of her eyes. "Then that's what we'll build. Day by day. Brick by brick." He leaned forward, kissing her softly. Day by day. The night settled in around them, the stars bright against the darkening sky. And as they sat together on that quiet rooftop, Alex felt the weight of light in his chest, warm and steady, a promise he would never stop fighting to keep. The night was cool, a soft breeze carrying the scent of spices and distant fires. Alex lay awake, the small room lit only by the pale glow of moonlight streaming through the window. Beside him, Lila slept curled against his side, her breath warm against his chest. He watched her, his fingers tracing the curve of her shoulder. Each breath she took was a quiet testament to everything they had survived, the battles fought, the lies laid bare, the ghosts laid to rest. He let the memories wash over him, the pain and the promise woven together like threads in the dark. She stirred, her lashes fluttering as she blinked sleepily up at him. "You're not sleeping," she murmured, her voice husky and soft. He smiled faintly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Didn't want to waste the night. Not when I have this." She shifted closer, her hand resting over his heart. "This isn't borrowed time, Alex. We've earned it." He closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the room settle into his bones. "I know. It's just, sometimes it still feels like a dream. Like I'll wake up and it'll all be gone again." She lifted her head, her lips brushing his jaw. "Then let me remind you. Every night, every morning, I'm still here. We're still here." He kissed her, slow and deep, the taste of her grounding him in the moment. When he pulled back, his voice was a quiet promise. "Then let's never forget. Let's never stop fighting for this." She smiled, her eyes shining. "We won't. I swear it." Outside, the world slept, the desert wind singing through the narrow streets. But in the arms of the night, Alex and Lila found something stronger than the past, something that no ghost could ever take away. Dawn crept in soft and golden, the light touching the cracked walls of their room like a blessing. Alex woke to the warmth of Lila pressed against him, her breath a gentle rhythm that lulled him back from the edge of sleep. He shifted, brushing his lips against her temple. She stirred, her eyes blinking open. "Good morning," she whispered, her smile sleepy and sweet. He grinned, his hand trailing down her back. "The best morning I've had in a long time." She laughed, a soft sound that felt like hope. "And it's only just begun." They rose together, moving through the small room in the hush of early light. Lila brewed tea over a small flame, the scent of mint and honey filling the air. Alex watched her, the simple grace of her movements grounding him in the here and now. "You know, I used to think mornings were for soldiers," he said, his voice low. "Early briefings. Orders barked before the sun even rose." She looked up at him, her eyes warm. "And now?" He stepped closer, his fingers curling around hers. "Now mornings are for us. For quiet, for breath, for choosing to stay." She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. "Then let's choose it. Every day." He kissed her, slow and sure. Every day. The morning light spilled across the room, painting them in gold. And in that quiet moment, Alex knew that this simple, fragile piece was worth every battle he had ever fought. Because in the end, it wasn't about the ghosts left behind. It was about the life he was finally ready to build. And he'd build it with her, day by day, breath by breath. The sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the small village that had become their haven. Alex and Lila walked slowly through the narrow streets, their fingers entwined, each step a quiet echo of the battles they had fought and the peace they had chosen. Children played in the dusty alleys, laughter rising like a hymn in the morning light. An old woman swept her doorway, pausing to offer a gentle nod as they passed. The smell of fresh bread drifted from a nearby stall, mixing with the sweet tang of citrus in the air. Alex paused at the edge of the square, watching a young boy chase a wooden hoop across the stones. For a moment, he let the weight of it all settle in his chest, the simplicity, the life that kept going even when the world tried to break it. He turned to Lila, his eyes soft. "It's strange, isn't it? How the world can be so cruel, and still so beautiful." She smiled, the lines at the corners of her eyes deepening in the light. "Maybe that's what makes it worth fighting for. Not the wars, but the laughter. The small things that survive." He reached for her, his hand warm on her waist. "Then let's make it ours. Let's make sure we never forget what we're building here." She leaned into him, her lips brushing his ear. "Promise me one thing, Alex. Promise me that no matter what comes next, we won't let the past steal this from us." He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice a quiet vow. "I promise. This, us, it's stronger than any shadow." The call to prayer rose from the small mosque, a song that cut through the quiet morning like a thread of light. Alex closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. And for the first time in years, he felt no weight on his shoulders. No ghosts clawing at his mind. Just the hum of life, the promise of what they'd found in each other's arms. As the morning sun turned to midday heat, Alex and Lila retreated to the shade of the small inn that had become their refuge. The air inside was cool and still, the soft light filtering through the single window. Alex leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed as he watched Lila move around the room, her bare feet silent on the worn stone floor. She paused, turning to him with a quiet smile. "You're watching me like you're still waiting for the next battle." He shrugged, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "Maybe I am. It's hard to let go of the fight when it's been your whole life." She walked to him, her fingers brushing his jaw. "And what if the fight is over? What if this," she gestured to the small room, the gentle light, "is the only battle left? Learning to be still, to let yourself breathe." He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest. "Then that's the fight I'll take. The only one that matters." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes deep and searching. "You're not that man anymore, Alex. You're not just a soldier." He took a deep breath, the truth of it settling into his bones. "No, I'm not. But I'm still yours. And I'll fight every day to prove I deserve this. To prove I deserve you." She kissed him then, slow and soft, her hands cradling his face. And in that quiet moment, the world beyond the window seemed to fall away. No missions, no orders, no ghosts. Just the steady beat of two hearts learning how to be whole again. When she pulled back, her voice was a whisper. "Then let's start here. Let's start now." He nodded, his lips curving in a smile that reached his eyes. Now. The night fell slow and gentle over the village, the air cool with the scent of earth and distant fires. Alex and Lila sat on the low stone wall outside the inn, the stars bright overhead. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her hair brushing his jaw, the soft hum of the world around them a lullaby. He traced idle patterns on her arm, his thoughts a quiet current beneath the calm. "Do you ever think about them? The men we lost, the lies we left behind." She turned her face up to his, her eyes dark pools in the starlight. "Every day. But not like I used to. Before, it felt like they were shadows, haunting every breath I took. Now they're memories. Pieces of who we are, not chains." He let her words settle, each one a balm to the old wounds he still carried. "I used to think I was nothing but a weapon, Lila. Just a ghost with a gun." She lifted her hand to his cheek, her touch soft and sure. "You're more than that, Alex. You always have been. You're the man who came back for me. The man who refused to let the past bury us." He closed his eyes, her warmth a shield against the night. "Then let this be the last goodbye. To the ghosts, to the war. Let this be the first step to something new." She pressed her lips to his forehead, her breath warm against his skin. "Then goodbye to the past, Alex. And hello to everything we're going to be." The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to the quiet promise that bound them. And in that stillness, Alex felt the weight of the world lift, a final breath of freedom, a final farewell to the life he'd survived. Tomorrow would come, and with it the promise of something more. But tonight was theirs. Morning arrived in a hush of light and warmth, the sky painted in soft strokes of gold and rose. Alex woke to the gentle weight of Lila's head resting on his chest, her breath a steady rhythm against his skin. The simple peace of it made his heart ache in the best way, a feeling he'd almost forgotten he was allowed to have. He lay still for a moment, savoring the quiet, the way the light shifted across the cracked walls of their small room. The echoes of war, of betrayal and gunfire, felt distant now, like the final notes of a song that had finally found its end. Lila stirred, her eyes blinking open to find his watching her. "You're up early," she whispered, her voice husky with sleep. He smiled, brushing his fingers through her hair. "I couldn't sleep. Didn't want to miss this. Waking up beside you, with nothing else waiting for us but the day." She smiled, her hand drifting up to rest over his heart. "That's all I want too, Alex. Just the day, just us." They rose together, moving through the morning like a ritual they were still learning, sharing tea in chipped mugs, washing their faces in a cracked basin, the weight of the past easing with every small, deliberate act. Outside, the village stirred to life, the quiet hum of voices and laughter a gentle reminder that the world didn't end when the fighting stopped. They stepped out into the square, the sun already warm on their skin. Alex paused, taking a slow breath as he let the moment settle into his bones. He turned to Lila, his eyes steady and sure. "This is it, Lila. The life we fought for. The life we're building together." She nodded, her hand slipping into his. "One day at a time." He smiled, leaning down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. One day at a time. They walked through the square, the laughter of children and the scent of fresh bread painting a quiet promise around them. The world wasn't perfect. There were still scars, still echoes of the battles they'd survived. But in that small village, in the warmth of each other's touch, they found something stronger than any war. As they reached the edge of the square, Alex paused, his eyes on the horizon. "Do you ever wonder if the world will ever understand what it took for us to get here?" Lila tilted her head, her smile soft and knowing. "Maybe. But even if they don't, we know. And that's enough." He turned to her, the question burning in his chest. "So tell me, Lila, if tomorrow never comes, would this still be enough for you?" She met his gaze, her eyes bright with tears she didn't try to hide. "Always, Alex. Always." As they walked away from the square, the sun rose higher, painting their path in light. And for the first time in so many years, Alex felt no fear in the dawn, only hope. "Now I've got to ask you, my friend, if tomorrow never came, would the memories you've built be enough to fill your heart?" Drop your answer in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you felt the power of this journey, do me a favor, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter in the stories we share. Let's keep this conversation going. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I'm here, and I'm listening. Until next time, keep the fight alive in your hearts, and keep building the lives that matter.